Let's see if, all right, that looks a lot better. There we go. All right, YouTube's up. And then I'm gonna go ahead and move Glacier Bot to the audience. So yeah, I've been doing AMAs for quite some time, and somehow I still managed to completely fuck that one up. But what's going on, everybody? Now we can officially start. The live stream's up. How's everybody doing today? Let's go ahead and talk about Glacier. So let's introduce the team. And then once we introduce the team, we're going to talk a little bit about what to expect for launch, and if launch is going to be soon or if it's going to be next year. And then we'll start taking some user questions and get everything answered. So the first thing is, I am Lame Hillbilly. My name is Austin. I am from Kentucky, and I've been doing projects on AVAX for almost over a year now. And Glacier is our next big project we plan on launching on Avalanche. So I'll be the founder and kind of the go-to community man, other than, of course, Top Gun. But Top Gun, if you want to take it away and talk about who you are.
What's going on, guys? I'm Top Gun, Dylan, Austin's brother. I am currently about 5-10 feet away from Austin. My power went out last night and hadn't came back, so I am here now, and I'm the community guy, Twitter guy, go between you guys and Austin if Austin's not available, because I have Austin's phone number. So if you need anything, reach out.
All right, and Avery, Jimmy, either one.
Hey guys, I'm Jimmy. I'm one of the backend devs for Glacier. Have been doing projects across lots of different chains for the past year and a half. But yeah, very excited to be on board the team.
And Avery, finish it off.
Yeah, come on, everyone knows who I am by now. I just shit post all over the place. But in terms of work, yeah, I'll be doing a lot of kind of content creation, been working with Top Gun on getting the right kind of aesthetics together. Got some stuff together already. We'll be helping him out with Twitter as well, and just like some more general stuff, spotting bugs for the dev team to look into and fix. And then scouting some opportunities on the side as well for Glacier, essentially integrations and partnerships and things like that.
Perfect. All right, and then the last person I guess that we could have up here, if Owen comes, we'll let him speak about himself if he's able to accept the invite here in a second. But he is our main advisor in the project, and yeah, he'll be able to speak a little bit more about his role. But to speak about Glacier and all things Glacier, we have kind of a guideline of what to talk about. And let me pull up the docs real quick, which actually will come up quite soon. If you were wondering, my lawyer is adding the legal disclaimer, and then that's it. Everything else is ready and proofread on the docs, and we'll release those out to you all. But some of the main features that I think are important to talk about is that our front end, we do have access to a front end that is more current than what other people are forking. And by more current, I mean about a month ago as when it was released, and it's on a current working fork of Solidly model. So we already have a pretty good idea of the issues that are at hand. And we already know most of them and have been working on them as a team in the back end. So that's one of our big features that I think that we have going for us, that as far as I know, no other current team has. So it puts us in a league ahead, hopefully with bug fixes and kind of some of the things that you all have seen as common issues with the front ends of these Solidly UIs. And then another thing is, the bug squashing is that I've talked extensively with the project leaders of the popular Solidly forks and found out exactly what issues we're facing. So we already have a good idea of kind of some of the common issues that you've seen on the back end and immutable contracts that we already know of, right? And another thing is that we do have proxies for some of the bigger contracts. So that means that they're not immutable, which means they can be changed and edited if we run into a big issue come launch. So that's really good. And as far as kind of the initial distribution and what we're looking at, and some of you all may have already heard this, but since we are recording it and on YouTube, I want to make sure that I go over it a little bit before. So our initial distribution kind of looks like this. 15% for early investors, which I will touch on. 25% for marketing and incentives. 18% for team. 15% for treasury. 7% for locking incentives. And 20% for airdrops. And to go over what all of that looks like, early investors, I have opened up a small allocation for early investors, but it's important to note that everything that's being sold on that is 100% locked, minus 2 or 3 people where I've worked out a different deal. But those people, are not going to be selling any tokens for the first half of the Glacier launch. So you don't have to be concerned about any liquid Glacier out there. I've seen a lot of people that did pre-sales and ICOs, and then a lot of that was just completely liquid. You won't have that issue here. Everything else is being sold as 100% V Glacier max locked. Our max lock is 3 months. So that's what you're going to see going out to all of the parties involved in this. And how we're selling it is that we're launching with a price of 3 cents, which puts us in an FDV of about 4.5 million. And early investors are getting it at a FDV of 3 million or 2 cent price tag. If you are interested in that, I'm not interested in selling, $100 batches of this. This is some more advanced investing, and I don't want just common people that may not understand the full ins and outs of investing or the risks that are adhered to it to start investing in this. So if you are interested in it, of course, reach out to me. And we do have some spots available, but it's not an ICO listing where I just give out a bunch of small airdropped V Glacier to everybody. I'm not trying to sell it to 1,000 people. And any of this that's not sold, of course, would be burned. And very similar to the airdrops and how I see the airdrops going is that if we can't find lucrative partnerships that are actually value add instead of value extraction, we would be burning the excess of that as well. Unless we find something better to use that allocation for. But I'm perfectly fine with having, less Glacier in the ecosystem at the launch because, of course, it is an inflationary token. So whatever we can do to get ahead of that is obviously better. So the team, 18%, will be completely 100% locked in V Glacier and will continue to be locked and recompounded. And we'll be voting on pairs like Glacier AVAX, AVAX USDC, Bitcoin, the Bitcoin pairing, the ETH pairing, all of that will be voted on by our NFTs in the team allocation, and we'll disperse those funds for compensation. So we don't get any liquid Glacier. We don't have any interest in selling liquid Glacier. We really want to make money the exact same way that you all make money. And I think that's healthier for the ecosystem if that's how we're using it, instead of looking to funnel out Glacier. And then the treasury, of course, will be used for runway on the project itself, any kind of exploits, compensation, and anything to add or impact Glacier in a positive way. And some of that will be voted on by the community, and some of that will be a decision by the team. The locking incentives, what we plan on doing is that we have a X amount of Glacier that we want to add to this pool. And then as you're voting early on, or I'm sorry, not voting, but locking your Glacier and your max locking, you'll get an extra 20 to 25% Glacier per interaction you do with that contract. And that'll go until that 7% allocation is completely gone. And then there will be no more. So hopefully it's gone within the first 2 or 3 weeks and everybody gets a bigger stack of V Glacier for being a little bit early and also participating in the lock governance feature. And then I already spoke about airdrops. So that's kind of our team allocation. And again, all of this will be in the documentation when it gets released, hopefully later today, if my lawyer gets back to me before we release it. And some of the other things, let me make sure. Everything else is pretty similar to what you've already seen in all the other V3 dexes. Listen, one of the things that we want to do is be fast movers into the market and try and get as much of the hype as we can. That's first off. But, second off, we want a complete product, right? We want to make sure that everything that we're doing is actually for the longevity of Glacier. So we're going to be adding more features after it launches. And we've already talked about that in the team. There's a roadmap. But for me, roadmaps are kind of a death spiral for a project. If anybody thinks that, like a business can have a roadmap, like a startup business can have a roadmap, and everything done in like a brick and mortar business or anything else has the longevity approach of, planning for 10, 20 years. But in DeFi, things change drastically, week over week. And if you adhere to a roadmap that goes for a year, it's very difficult to not only manage that and manage the community expectations on that, but also it's almost doing a disservice to you all and the protocol at large, because there's going to be things that come up in a week or 2 weeks that are going to be better opportunities than that we're current. We're at bleeding edge tech here, and things change in such a moment's notice that it's impossible to adhere and also be successful to a roadmap that has so much longevity as a year or 2 years or whatever it is. But the goal here is that we constantly bring in the best tech that we can, or develop better tech, and constantly make Glacier as a business more impactful to the ecosystem of Avalanche, and bring it to more eyes and be more successful. So I understand that that's something that people ask for, but that is my reasoning that we don't launch with a roadmap. Of course, any new features that we plan on implementing will be discussed with you all and told to you all. But again, just for me personally, it's very difficult for me to adhere to a roadmap. Also, for audits and KYC, I'm not one to get KYC. The team that I have, I trust with my life. But me personally, I'm publicly doxxed. I've had a track record in the space of over a year and have yet to do anything malicious, and don't plan on it anytime soon. KYC companies are a complete sham. If you didn't know, it's a service for trust, and that never works. It's perverse incentives for the companies that do it. And to me, KYCs just aren't impactful to the space. We have not seen any positive effect come from KYCs. So me personally, I don't enjoy KYCs. Audits. We do plan on getting audits, even though we're a hard fork of Solidly. And there's not, and we already know all of the known exploits. We'll of course have a bug bounty, and we will eventually get an audit. Now, whether that be before launch or after launch, I'm not sure of yet. But we will have a bug bounty in place from that early investor capital raise. And to go back a little bit to the early investor capital raise, the reason for that is that, of course, we have compensation for the team that's going to be paid over time and for contracts and stuff like that. But also the majority of that is going to be going to bribe incentives early on, and initial LP. And so what we can do is pretty much boost the effects of all of our LP by adding, more Glacier that we buy from the market with these funds, or straight USDC, whatever it is. We can add and increase the APRs, so that we can be a sought after LP incentive for, newcomers and people that have been farming for quite some time on maybe something like Trader Joe, and get them eyes on us, which is kind of our goal. And what we're planning on doing is drive not only new TVL into Avalanche, but of course, anybody that's currently LPing and not getting the great incentives that come from Solidly forks, is to allow them to have a better space for LP. And with that comes brand recognition and brand loyalty. So that's kind of the reason that we're raising that capital. And I'm trying to think of anything else. And I think the last thing we can really touch on before we start taking some user questions is 0.2% for volatile pairs. That is the fee. And then 0.02% for stable pairs. Now, I will say that we want to be competitive, so we may adjust that down. I don't see us adjusting it up ever, but we may adjust it down and see the impacts of that, and make sure that we are as competitive as we can be with the other, like Trader Joe and everybody else with their order liquidity book, or whatever, the liquidity order book, or whatever they're calling it, just to make sure that we are as competitive as we can be. So that is it. That is a brief overview. And I know I just puked that all out of my mouth, so you can always go back and rewatch the video. But now I think it's time for Dylan to start reading us some questions. You're not unmuted. Oh, I muted you.
Balance alone. Hey folks, I'd like to know the topology tokenomics of the DEX and the type of burn mechanisms that will be in play for it.
Wait, read it again.
I'd like to know the topology of the DEX and the tokenomics of the DEX and the type of burn mechanisms that will be in play for it.
Yeah, so right now we don't have any burn features, but we do plan on implementing them. I want some deflationary aspects to the tokenomics, but I think that I've done a pretty good job on doing the entire Dex and kind of giving an overview of it. But right now we don't have any burn mechanics. But I think in the future, one of our big goals is, of course, to soak up as much of the Glacier supply and getting it off the market as possible. But nothing to honestly speak on right now.
And Rad Dad, will all the tokens from Frozen Walrus be part of the deck somehow? And will X Walrus be tradable?
Yeah, so that's more of a Frozen Walrus question, and I want to keep it as Glacier oriented as we can. Of course, all of the tokens will be whitelisted on the site, and Frozen Walrus Treasury will be boosting the pairs with their V Glacier, and that's how it'll be. And X Walrus will, of course, be tradable.
Will there be a pre-sale for Glacier?
Yeah, I spoke a little bit about the early investor NFTs that you can buy, being the V NFTs, and that is the only pre-sale that we have.
All right. Will let's see here. I can't even pronounce this name. The Narthris. Will Glacier 5 prioritize partnering with protocols already on AVAX? If so, when will expansion or incentives to other blockchains begin?
Yeah, I mean, we want to pair with some of the good projects that we've seen, and I've reached out to a couple. We have one that's very interested, that is quite huge on AVAX, and getting and participating in governance. And we'll announce that as we get closer, whenever we have the launch date. And you know, the thing is that I think that there's not a lot of really good DeFi protocols that are building on AVAX that are as impactful as some of the other chains that we've seen. And I don't know why that is, but right now there's not huge impactful partners that we can make on AVAX. So the goal is to kind of bring other protocols that are doing really good with the like liquidity layers and things being done on other ecosystems and other protocols that we can bring into AVAX. And that's one of the things that Owen's really been working on quite often. So that's one of the big things I want to see, is bringing more projects to AVAX than are currently here, and try and expand the ecosystem a little bit more.
And how many projects do you plan to whitelist prior to launch?
I think we'll probably start with, as of right now, I think, you know, from what I've seen, let me think. I know there's probably going to be at least 15 to 20 pairs, but that may grow as we whitelist projects that may not be on AVAX right now to move over. Most of the whitelisting will be some of the trusted protocols that are currently on AVAX that we can just throw up and put on there. But then the other ones would be new partner protocols that may not be on AVAX yet that we'll have to bring in. But I think there's going to be at least, you know, 15 at minimum.
And finally, are there any specific goals that you have set for metrics like TVL in the first weeks or months after launch?
Yeah, I think, you know, the first couple of weeks is just having a successful launch and bug free. Right. I think that one of my big goals is to make sure that our launch is as impactful as possible, and that's comes down to the user experience. If we leave people saying, "Wow, how did Glacier have no bugs, but all these other Solidly Forks did?" Or you know, you come in and you have a good user experience, and you're like, "There's good incentives here. The website works as intended." That's really awesome. And making sure that's a good user experience for people. But then secondly, for months ahead, you know, I don't have a certain TVL metric that I really want to see, but I think that seeing it grow week over week is the most important thing. And seeing that we're constantly having growth in the early months will show a lot of success to the flywheel that we're trying to produce. But maybe, you know what, if anybody else has any goals in mind, you can feel free to speak, but those are my main ones.
And then Billy, our good friend Billy, wants to know, has Glacier applied or looked into applying for any grants through AVAX Foundation?
Not yet. I have talked to the Ava Labs team, but I don't know that they're going to give us any grants. They're usually, like, AVAX is really stingy about their grants, and they really want people to try and produce like fresh new things, even though 90% of what's in DeFi is really forked at the launch, and then, you know, implemented new tech later on. So to me, do I think that we'll get an AVAX grant? No. But I think if Glacier has some success, there may be incentives that AVAX can produce for us once we show ourselves in the space for a little bit.
And he also wants to know, will there be any way to obtain either locked or unlocked Glacier tokens before initial launch?
Wait, read that one again. I was reading.
Will there be any way to obtain either locked or unlocked Glacier tokens before initial launch? I think that goes back to the early investor.
Yeah, just the early investor stuff. Again, 95% of that will be completely locked Glacier that will be airdropped to those users. But other than that, there won't be any. I'd say there's only a little bit of actual freestanding liquid Glacier at launch. So there won't be much selling at all unless people buy it and then, of course, sell it later. But you won't see a lot of liquid Glacier in the market.
All right. Expand a bit on your thoughts about the future of Glacier post launch. What new things do you wish to see on the platform that you're excited about?
I think that's a huge question to ask when we're just trying to model out just the launch and making it successful. Of course, we have future plans. It's something that, of course, that we want to talk about to differentiate us from the the other solidly forks and just any DEX that currently host liquidity. Some of the big things is what can we bring that's currently being seen in other DEXs that are doing really well. And I think Uniswap v3, liquidity management, and then some other features that Balancer currently has, I would love to see on our DEX. That doesn't mean that they're going to be implemented, but it is some of the things that I personally would like to see. So it's all down to making sure that we have an impactful launch first, and then everything else that comes after will be building a successful business plan to give Glacier the biggest success possible.
All right. Natser DM. One of the biggest user experiences issues with solidly forks is it seems that volatile versions of stablecoin pools are automatically created, and they often cause problems for users to find their LP and withdraw when they accidentally deposit to it. Have you guys had any plans to resolve these issues for users? I bet that alone would reduce at least 25% of user issues, discords, questions to mods.
Yeah, I think actually Avery looked into the issue. Most recently, we just talked about it in the team chat because as soon as I saw that, I wanted to make sure that any issues we had, we listed them, and that was one of the ones that he seemed to have found. Doesn't mean that we have a fix for it right now, but we do know of it, and we are going to be looking to make sure that we don't launch with it. But it looks like it's more of a user error that allows you to put two stable coins into a volatile pair, which should not be allowed. But it is something that apparently it launches with. So if we can do anything to kind of mend that gap of making sure users know not to do it first off, and when I release this video that I should hear in the short term within the next couple of days, I'll detail it out as well of how to create liquidity on these dexes and making sure you all as users understand it for educational purposes. But hopefully there's some things that we can do on the development side that can mitigate, kind of a user error from the start.
All right. Let's see here. Deck art. Hi, team. I'm very glad witnessing how initial ideas evolve in every new AMA. You are really listening to the community. There's one aspect regarding emissions that I missed for having a complete V33. I saw in docs a 1% decay until week 100, and after that, 0.5%. Apart from that, as I expect a higher locking percentage than average due to max lock reduction to 3 months. Do you consider to apply 3.3 also regarding to adapt weekly emissions linked to that lock ratio?
Yeah, I was reading that question earlier, and I think that, and Jimmy, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the thing is that, we put that as a standard for what we've seen, and it's also been pretty successful in all of the dexes that have implemented this kind of emission cycle. It's arbitrary at first, like how much emissions we're giving out, because right now, the first week of Glacier, when we give out 3 million of emissions, 3 million tokens as emissions, at launch price, that's 90,000. But if Glacier goes up 3 to 4x, that could drastically change how much emissions that we're actually giving out. And so the goal here is to make sure that we're monitoring it and have actual data to prove, are we giving out too many emissions? Is things getting too inflationary? And we can, of course, edit that. If I'm not mistaken, Jimmy, through the proxies of being able to edit out the emissions, so that if we're giving out too much, we could, of course, reserve it a little bit and turn it down. See if Jimmy's here.
Yep, that's possible. Yeah, sorry, I was just unmuting.
No, you're good. Yeah, so it's definitely possible. Is that even having? Does that need proxies for us to edit the emissions, or can it just be done?
Yes, we'll need to use a rewards distributor and an inter contract, which takes care of that,
Perfect.
basically. So yeah, we could just swap those out.
Perfect. So with that in mind, then we know for sure that we're going to be able to edit emissions on the go whenever we think. I don't think that we'll need any kind of community input for that because we're going to be looking for like hard data for how much. Essentially, what we look for when we have emissions is that how much we're giving out in monetary value and how much Glacier is being bought and locked. And if that ratio is getting too extreme one way or the other, then that's when we'll start tampering with the emission model.
All right. Minnesota Richard. Looking forward, what sort of ways are you looking to drive trading volume to our pairs? Also, what are some of the reasons that whales would choose Glacier over more established dexes in terms of parking their liquidity?
Yeah, so I think the second part's a little bit easier than the first. Getting trading volume really comes down to getting aggregators on board and making sure that we have the deepest liquidity and the best pairings for aggregators to pick up. And then, secondly is competitions and making it somewhere that, users just come to. Right now, I talked about this in a previous AMA. Right now, the default when you come on AVAX is, well, I got to get on Trader Joe. But, if we can get into the psyche of what makes a user pick Trader Joe, and we can make that change over to, well, I'm on AVAX, so I got to get on Glacier, then that really will just pick up volume because there's trading happening on AVAX. There's over 50 million in volume of trading fees or trading being done on AVAX. So really the goal is making sure users use our platform rather than Trader Joe or anything else that's currently available. And also having new users that don't use AVAX come and come on AVAX and know that their LP is valued here and giving them a good space to use that LP. So that's one of the main goals. And then the second part is how do we get whales over? Whales rotate and look for incentives, right? So the thing that we can do here is making sure that our incentives are impactful through bribes and through everything else that we have as far as the emissions and making sure that Glacier is an impactful token that holds value quite well. I think all of those will lead to whales. It's not like they have Trader Joe tattooed on them. They're not committed to Trader Joe. They're committed to incentives. And we just have to prove that we have incentives that go for the long term and also that our contracts are safe. Once that happens, then people will cycle into wherever the emissions are. So I think that's how we get them.
Monkey Mayhem. Is the proxy behind a time lock and multi-sig?
Jimmy, you can talk a little bit about that. If that's best security practice, I'm sure that's what we'll be doing, at least time lock. I don't know about multi-sig yet. If we do, it would probably be Jimmy and LB on the multi-sig. But Jimmy, can you talk about the best practices we can do with the proxies?
I mean, that is pretty well. I mean, if you do have an issue and you have time lock, then you won't be able to upgrade your proxy. So it is kind of a double-edged thing. It is better to do a time lock, but you have to keep that in mind. So if something does go wrong, wait until the time lock is up to upgrade your proxy. It's always best to have a multi-sig as well, obviously. No doubt about that.
So yeah,
That is best.
so pretty much if we do a proxy, it almost makes if we do a time lock on the proxy, it almost makes it a bit moot because proxies are really there for fast changes so that we can fix any issues.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, if it comes to a point of people aren't trusting, maybe we'll look into time locks. But I think as it stands, maybe we don't launch with time locks or do something different. But definitely a multi-sig I think is necessary. We're going to do as much as we can to make it secure, but also make sure that we know this is bleeding edge tech and solidly is quite complicated. We got to make sure that we can change things. I've seen so many solidly forks launch and have so many issues that are immutable and unable to change, redeploying contracts, not having the proper things in place to be able to make edits and be different and be able to execute on making a user experience good. So it's a double-edged sword. What else you got, Dylan?
Louisiana Swamp Rat on YouTube. You mentioned your investors/friends will have liquid tokens that are able to be sold upon launch, but that they will not sell at launch. Can you expand on this more, please?
Yeah, so there's only 4 investors that have been invested for over 2 months now. And these are people that I've had following me for over 6 months to a year. Those investors were in this platform and investing in Glacier from before Glacier even was a V33 Dex. They believed in my vision and wanted to, pretty much fund the operation. And because of that trust and faith, I'm giving them the trust and faith back by giving them some liquid tokens. And again, that's only 4 parties, a total of maybe like less than 1 million Glacier. And most of them are actually locking for all 3 months. So I'm not really concerned about them dumping. It's not like it's some people I've met in DeFi. These are people that I've had, video and voice chats with over the course of the last 6 months, almost weekly. I trust them not to be selling these tokens. And even if they did, it would not be very impactful to the price because they don't have enough liquid tokens to even do it. But these are people that, again, I personally trust, and I've done a lot of things right in the space, and I don't put my trust in a lot of people, so I feel very confident. And the reason they're getting liquid is because this was before Glacier was fully developed. That I knew that I was going to even do an early investor fund, and that there was going to even be when I did open the doors to new people. The reason that everybody else is locked is because I don't have that same level of trust for everybody else, and I need to make sure that they're in it for the right reasons. When you invest in somebody and invest in a product that literally doesn't even have a front end or a back end, it says something for their kind of how much faith they have in me, and I'm just trying to show that back to them. So I fully expect them to act appropriately whenever they get liquid tokens.
All right. Cheers. Love to Calvary's ear. Any general minimum for buying that V Glacier? 5 figures.
I'd say it'd be a minimum of 5 figures, depending on who's asking. Most of the time, what I'm seeing right now is that protocols that are wanting to partner or wanting to get involved early are investing in this V Glacier, and those are the more impactful ones because they're using it with their already either they're partnered and they're getting some already from partnerships from airdrops, or they're parties that have been using Solidly Forks for quite some time and understand the risk, and also are able to put in big capital. So those are the kind of the people that we see. And it doesn't mean that you have to be those people to kind of invest. And of course, reach out to me if you feel like you want to invest in that and what kind of capital you have, and maybe we can work around it. The main goal is so that I don't have 500 airdrops to give out on the first day. I don't want to put Jimmy and LB in a spot where they're focused on airdrops rather than fixing bugs.
Ricchiosaurus wants to know, does Glacier have a boost for liquidity where a locked NFT is required to get the max APR, i.e. Solidly, ETH, Solid Lizard, etc.? Or is it more like Equalizer, Velodrome with no boost?
So I have recently found out that a boost is possible with about 4 lines of code. That's what Dystopia did, and we've looked into it. I don't know right now that we're implementing it. There's one partner that kind of wants us to implement it. But at this time right now, I'm going to assume that we're not implementing it. It is a really cool feature, and it came from Balancer, and I do like it. But I don't want to overcomplicate launch and overcomplicate the user experience of knowing that you get boosted from having V Glacier. Of course, it does give more utility to the V NFT, which is great. I really like that because anything we can do to make it more sought after to get into the V Glacier and locking your Glacier is better for everybody. So we'll see if we're going to implement that by the end, and I'll make an announcement if we do. But as of right now, it's not something we have.
All right, and final question. Is it possible to avoid or shorten the Epoch 0 soft launch phase and immediately launch with emissions?
It'd be something for Jimmy, maybe. So read it again, and then Jimmy, or maybe you heard
Yeah,
it.
no, I heard it. It's fine. Still doing tests on that. But it seems like it's possible where we can just manually deposit the rewards for Epoch 0, and then notify the reward amount basically in the contract.
Yeah, that's kind of how it went with Equilibre that recently launched. They had immutable contracts, but it looks like Sterling had the same issue. And what they did was the notify reward function that Jimmy's talking about is they filled it up manually with the first week of emissions. And then, after the next week, it's already good to go. But that is a very big known issue. We don't want anybody missing out on emissions. And that is a big goal of ours to make sure that we don't make that same mistake at least.
Do you kind of want to explain what Epoch Zero looks like for people that might not be familiar?
I mean, Epoch Zero is the first where people are voting for governance and setting up the emissions for the following week, right? It's really no different. It's just it seems to be the biggest issue that we've seen come out of solidly dexes is it screws up the emissions because when Epoch Zero rolls over, no emissions are given out, and then everybody's kind of sitting on their lock governance for an extra week, which is currently what's happening at Equilibre.
All right, guys, do you have any more questions?
All right, guys. If there's no more questions, that's perfectly fine. Of course, you can always load them back up in AMA questions, and I can try and answer them. We're going to try and set up another closer to launch, but I think the next big one is the launch date. So my goal here is to make a launch date that I know that we can hit, and once we know that, we're going to try and beat it. Right? That doesn't mean that we will, but the goal is that we're ready to beat the launch date that I give out. And so currently, we're planning on launching by the 31st of March. And again, hopefully, we beat that and we beat it before the epoch. The epoch rollover that would happen right before that would be the 29th, because all of the epochs are at Wednesday at 23:59 UTC. So the goal would be to beat that. And if we can even beat it faster than that, it would actually be the day of my birthday, which is the 23rd, which would be really cool. So those are the expected launch dates. I know it's quite soon, but we did get a pretty big head start, and it seems like LB and Jimmy have a really good understanding of the contracts. And I think that we're going to be ready to roll at that time.
All right, we did have one more question. It was, will you have a sort in the voting tab to allow to sort by voting APR?
I wish Jumpman was here because that's something that he could comment on. But if it's, I think it's already in the front end that we have, the sorting
is.
feature. So I don't. Yeah, you're gonna see that at launch.
All right, let's see here.
You got any more?
Let me check YouTube. Looks like that is it.
Well, perfect, guys. Well, I will end it there, and I will let you know when we schedule the next AMA, hopefully in the next week or two. And we're going to keep growing. So one of the big things that you're going to see from us is that there's not going to be a lot of bot activity. I try and get real user engagement by the way that we invite people and attract people through word of mouth rather than marketing pushes. I do have some awesome ideas for marketing, but we'll have to take that over later. But right now, the goal is to just have people that are actually investors, real user acquisition in the Discord, and not worry so much about big numbers in the Discord or big numbers on the Twitter, but rather make sure that we have people that actively want to engage in the platform. And I think we're doing a really good job. So 650 people is amazing. And I think that'll obviously get bigger when we get closer to launch. But if you've been listening, thank you so much. Make sure you're sharing with your grandmothers and your friends and family. And we will be back again, hopefully quite soon. And I'll see you then. If you guys have any other closing remarks, go ahead. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll invite Glacier Finance back up, the bot. We'll let him play us out, and we'll end it here.
Nice one, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Goodbye.